So if anybody's listened to the last 4 interviews that I've done, you know that one name has been coming up time and time again, and that name is Luis Olivero. And we have him here today. Thank you so much, Luis, for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, 1997 was not so long ago in my mind, but I guess it was when you look at the calendar. But back in 1997, somewhere, I don't know if it was on the internet, probably not, you heard about a job in Orlando. Tell us how it is that you even heard about this job at Fox 35 News.
Oh, okay. Let's go back to those days. So, let's go back a little bit even further than that.
Sure.
I was working at WTVT in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
A producer named Allison told me, hey, you got to get over to Orlando. So I ended up going over to WCPX, which is the CBS station.
Channel 6.
I was there for a couple of years, working the desk. It was a great experience. But the station was coming up for sale. They were going to sell it over to Post because it used to be owned by the Marriott. The WCPX was owned by Marriott, as I recall. And because it was going to go for sale, you know, they had some new management come in. And I just thought that it was really time to, you know, move on. So I'd heard that over the folks over at Fox 35 are going to start a newscast. And I said, you know what? Let's just give it a try. So I went ahead and applied. You know, as you know, when you're in TV, you're always trying to move up or, you know, see if you can get a better position or a higher market. This, that, the other thing. So I went ahead and applied. And I was fortunate enough to meet the great Bill Avery, and went to the interview, and at the time it was just Bill and Kate, and I don't know if Tara was there or not. I think we may have been hired the same day. But the funny thing is you know, when you have your interview with Bill back in those days, you know, everything went fine, and then you would sit down in his office, and then if he would make you an offer, you would basically walk out with one of these. And these are the T-shirts that Bill would give if you got the job. And always loved a underdog situation because it was very limited resources. It was a startup. It was scrappy. It was just, you know what, let's go for it. And it was literally a blank canvas. There was nothing there. There was just literally the newsroom. Well, there wasn't a newsroom.
Not even a newsroom yet.
An empty room.
So was that appealing to you, or was that something like you're not sure? I mean, you'd been at Channel 6. You were already at an established station that had been on the air, 40 or 50 years. Was that appealing to you to go someplace that hadn't been doing news at all?
It was a challenge of a lifetime. and the reason why it was a challenge of a lifetime, at least from my perspective, from the assignment desk and the logistics part of it, because that's really what I was, you know, it really into his logistics. It was a challenge that I know very few people would ever come across in a lifetime. And it was very appealing, and I was just, I jumped at it. I was very, very glad that, you know, Bill agreed to, bring me on, and everybody else that came along. And it was literally an opportunity of a lifetime.
Not many people, when they apply for a job at an assignment desk, actually get there and find out there is not an actual physical assignment desk yet. That place was empty pretty much, wasn't it?
It was empty. We did have some fold-out desks, you know, that we could put like phones and stuff on before things started getting built in the newsroom. Because as you've heard before from some of the previous interviews, it used to be I believe it was a golf magazine type setup. And obviously a TV operation is completely different from a print operation, at least in those days. I mean, everything's digital now these days, but there wasn't a whole lot. And I believe there's a picture or two, you know, Tara and I literally on working out on like fold tables with like a phone and, something. So I'm sure Tara can attest to all of this.
So how long before, let's say the first episode was March 1st, 1998, how many months of preparation were you involved with there?
As I recall, I was hired with 180 days to go. And I believe, again, Tara was the same. So we had 6 months to put a newsroom together, for Bill to hire people, to bring live trucks, cars, cameras, equipment, set everything up. Um, so it was, I mean, for a long time, it was really mostly getting out and letting people know that, hey, we're a news station. I mean, not a news station in town, but a station that was getting ready to do a local newscast. They did have a young lady that used to do those news cut-ins, and for the life of me, I cannot remember her name.
I've seen some video clips. I've seen some video clips of those on the internet. Yes, an older gentleman as well did them sometimes.
Yeah, she was. I met her. She was really, really nice lady. But it was getting out. It was letting the PIOs. It was letting all the agencies know. It was letting both the local government, county government, all these guys know. Hey, we are going to start doing news. Please know that if we ask for a meeting, we're going to come ask for video. So don't mind if we come start shooting video of your building, or we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And we would love to, we met with Mayor Hood. We had Joanne Bauer at the time meet with Mayor Hood, and we taped everything for that interview just so that we could have the B-roll. I've heard the stories of B-roll before, and there was a lot of B-roll that we shot.
Yeah, because you had nothing.
But yeah, there was just a lot of things. When you're starting from scratch, there's a lot of things to set up. There was phones, there was, computers, there was just, you name it, everything.
And in this day and age, that just doesn't happen. Every TV station that's up and running is fully established, and nobody starts a new TV news station anymore. So it seems like that's one of the last circumstances like that in Central Florida, where you apply for a job and there's nothing, and you're going on the air in 180 days. Really unique situation for you.
It was. Again, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. That's why I just couldn't say no to it. Because how many people can say, look, we actually did a startup, and we went from nothing on the ratings book to number one. I think it was in 2 or 3 books that we overtook our competition at the time.
At 10 p.m., yes. So when you first got the job, what was the day-to-day operations for you like those first few days and weeks?
Well, it was interesting because, again, we kind of had to figure out, well, okay, for example, what vehicles are we gonna drive? And Bill had this great idea that he wanted to buy these Mustangs. So
he was ahead of his time.
I started looking around, and I started calling around different dealerships, this, that, the other thing. A lot of people thought, obviously, we're crazy, but ended up working something out, again, with Bill's blessing and all of this. We ended up, I think it was either 8 or 9 cars that we ended up buying from a dealership in Gainesville, of all places, because I was calling everybody.
Yeah.
I say, I need this many cars, and I need them this soon. And the guy that sold them to us, as I recall, it was a dealership in Gainesville. And obviously, as a salesman, he was very happy.
Oh my gosh, you made his day. You made his year.
Yes. And I don't know if you guys know this, but it was actually, he ended up putting a factory order in, and they were all sequential vehicle identification numbers. They were all sequential VIN numbers.
So they came out of the factory. They came out of the factory all in order for Fox 35, and those are the VIN numbers.
Yes, they did. So that was one aspect of it. Another aspect of things were, okay, what technology are we going to use as far as, these were many, many, many meetings that Tara, Kate Hansen, Bill, and I had about, okay, what are we going to do? What's the technology? Is it what type of cameras? What type of media? Which at the time it was what type of tape we were going to use. Bill made the decision to go with DVC Pro, which was then an emerging digital media. And then there was also, okay, what are we going to do as far as being able to broadcast, the video? Is it going to be from tape, Is it going to be from servers? Because that's when servers were first starting to come in.
Right.
And I think you have a picture of the servers, the blue ones, um, and we'll get into that in a little bit,
Yeah.
a little bit later. Getting a set built. I remember, I remember I was so sick when they came in to do the set presentation. You know, there were the concepts for the set, and I was just, I mean, literally, I was very, very sick.
And you were probably
And
working 80 hours, a week.
yeah, I was really not feeling well, and they're talking about, they're showing us all these renderings, and I'm sitting here going, "Oh God, I just want to go home." Anyways, so the set got built. All these things happened, but it was literally walk into an empty room and say, "Okay, you're going to start a newscast," and you have to look at everything and go, "Ooh, there's a lot of things we have to buy."
Yeah, there was a lot of moving parts to that. And so you were coming into work every day, coming into an empty building and just one little piece at a time. Did you have a calendar with giant X's on it counting down those 180 days? Because it must have been scary after a while how close it was getting.
We did have a countdown. Obviously, it wasn't digital, but we did have, I think it was on a board. And that's how I remember it was like day 180 when I started. And oh, yeah. And we literally had to back down to, okay, you have to get the technical infrastructure in, then you have to get the people in, then you have to start doing run-throughs, then you have to, in between the technical and the run-throughs, you have to get all this video. Meanwhile, news is happening in the market. And one of the things that I know some of the folks have talked about was doing the promos, and once the cars came in and they were shooting in film, but again, news were still happening at the time. So it was, how do you cover that and still do the promos, still do this, that, the other thing, still do the run-throughs. And so there was a lot of parts and pieces that were moving. I mean, we had to, I remember we had ordered the live trucks, the sat truck came in later, and that's another story. But those are, the type of things that we were doing. There was really, it was unprecedented, at least from my perspective, because I had never done that before. I never done a startup before. That's why, again, to the beginning of this conversation, it was such a challenge that I just couldn't turn down.
Coming from Channel 6, you'd go to work every day. You probably had a nice routine. You'd come in, you'd answer phones, assignment, this reporter's going to go here and there. But then you come to this place and you've got like 50 new jobs.
Yeah. And none of them knew the market. Most of them, as I recall, let's see, the original team. You should have a picture of them. Joanne was not local. Trying to think.
David Martin.
Most of them were really from other markets.
Beth Sherman.
David Martin,
Yeah, you're
there.
right.
He came from, I believe, Altoona, Pennsylvania. Beth Sherman, obviously, she came down.
Laura Stewart.
And Laura Stewart. Yeah, really, most of those folks were from other markets, so it was getting to know things.
Right, and back then, they were dealing with paper maps back then, too. Always having to hold a map out. There were no computers back then. They were holding on to paper maps when they needed to go to locations.
Yeah, funny you mentioned that. Before I started on Fox, one of the things that we figured out over at Channel 6 was that, especially when it came to helicopters, this is a little bit of a previous story. When you're flying up in a helicopter, maps, like map books, don't mean anything to you. And then one of the things that had finally started coming out back in those days, and we figured it out, and we had for a time, we had an advantage. We had a competitive advantage over this is again over at 6, was that we figured out these one maps that you could actually move the cursor around, and it would give you the latitude and the longitudes. And I would remember talking to the pilot and say, "Hey, if I give you lat longs, will that help?" He literally grabbed my shirt. His name was Rich. He grabbed my shirt. He's like, "Give me the coordinates." So
you made his day.
So we did, and that was one of the things that worked really well for helicopters. And again, what you'll see that there is a picture of one helicopter visit that came because they were trying to, get us in there.
Yeah.
But that was something that I talked to them about.
It had the Fox 35 logo on the helicopter.
Yeah, that was.
If that was a baseball
well,
card, that would be a huge collector's item because that never existed.
No, it didn't. We obviously it was very cost prohibitive. You know, we were not on a large budget. However, they came to us and said, "Would you like us to give you a demo?" And obviously, we said sure. They actually landed the helicopter in the parking lot at the Fox 35 station. You'll see the picture there.
Yeah, I saw the photo.
Bill and I standing there looking at this helicopter, going, "Man, those are cool graphics."
Yeah. That was good. That was good. They were trying to sell you hard on that, putting the logo on there and everything. But yeah, budget was definitely a major issue you guys had to deal with. And speaking of technology, one of the things that Bill talked about that you saved the company a lot of money on was when you discovered the technology of Nextel. Tell us about how you found out about that and who did you meet that told you about that?
Replaced.
How'd you do that?
Coast to coast walkie-talkies get it done. Nextel.
So Nextel at that time, well, let's backtrack a little bit. Most of the way stations communicated back then was through radio networks, and they have repeater stations. Obviously, there was no texting back then. That had not come into play yet. So there was this technology that was I believe they called Direct Connect. We were looking for cell phones. We needed them anyways. And those Nextels were actually analog cell phones. They were not digital because that eventually changed. And in conversations that Bill and I had with, the folks from Master Control, we're like, do we want to try and stand up a whole radio system, repeater system, where we can do this with the Nextels? And Bill, with all his foresight, said, no, we're going to do these, Nextels Direct Connect. And you could do, and the great thing about that was that nobody else could hear us.
Correct.
Like in my scanners, I could hear the other stations, their live trucks, I could hear, their crews, but nobody knew what we were up to, which was great.
Which means they weren't going to get the scoop on a story because you were communicating over the radio.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I remember you could do group direct connects where you can talk to, like, say, the live truck and the reporter, and say if there was a photog, because again, back in those days, a lot of them were it's called one-man bands.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all for posterity, so we call them one-man bands
Yes.
back then. So so it really worked out well. I mean, it really, really did. I don't know what they're using now because obviously I've been gone for a long time.
I'm assuming they're texting. They text each other like crazy, and I see a lot of them sometimes. They have their phones, like I sort of do right now. My phone is plugged in, and you can use your phone as an IFB these days. And they all.
By the way, for those who don't know, IFB stands for interrupted feedback.
Thank you. Thank you for helping out with the terminology. You never know who's listening to these shows. You never know. This will be up on YouTube for years and years, and someday somebody's going to know what that is. So you sent me about 100 photos. Thank you very much for that. We've been showing these photos right now during this episode. But before you sent me those group of 100 photos, you sent me a photo of what I believe was a lightning strike, which finally revealed the tornadoes of 1998 that were going on at the time. Tell me about that photo that you sent.
So, very interesting story. I mean, it was a horrible, horrible night. We were doing run-throughs at the time because we were launching March 1st. This was, I believe, it was February 20th through the 22nd, and the Osceola County area was totally devastated. The name of there was a trailer park. It was called the Ponderosa Trailer Park, and it was literally decimated. It was multiple people killed. I believe it was 44. It was horrible. It really, really was horrible. But there was also tornadoes that touched down in Winter Garden, Volusia County, Orange County. I'll never forget, my apartment at the time was very close to the station in Lake Mary. So after this event happened, obviously we were covering it. We had sent out again, being in run-throughs, we were acting like we were doing a newscast, sending people out, getting video, this, that, the other thing. Well, one afternoon, I'm talking to some of the guys over in sales. I don't even know why I was talking to somebody in sales. And he goes, Oh yeah, we were out that night, and it was really like lightning, and we were having like a little party, and we were videotaping it, and we got this video,
Oh boy.
and I'm like, video of what? He's like, well, it looked like a tornado. I'm like, can I see this video? He's like, sure. So I see this video, and I'm like, I knew exactly what it was, and I said, have you shared this video with anybody else? He goes, no. Said, I would love to buy this video from you and have exclusive rights to the video from you. He said, yes. So I was talking to Janice. I said, Janice, we have something that nobody else has. How about we send you with a full talk to the National Weather Service in Melbourne, and let's go have a conversation, shoot a package, da-da-da-da-da. They liked it so much that eventually it became part of their website. They had it, obviously it's been so many years since, so they have now moved it to a document in the background, but they literally have incorporated it because we told them that they could have it. And to this day, if you go to the National Weather Service office in Melbourne and you do a search on the tornadoes from 1998, that image comes up, and it's a screen grab of, again, a party that night that people were a little far away, so they were safe, but you can actually see the tornado being backlit by lightning.
And to remind the viewers, once again, you guys were still not even on the air yet. You weren't even not a news station on the air.
That's correct. I think by the time we got a hold of that video, it would have been after March 1st, because it was like a week or two after. I mean, the story made air. I remember that.
That's just amazing to think about. And something that David Martin had said to me, it's pretty amazing that in the 25 years since that happened, we've been very fortunate when it comes to tornadoes.
Yes, we have. It's one of those things that weather in Florida, as you know, it's hurricanes in the summer and fall. It's tornadoes in the spring, because of obviously you still have the cold fronts coming in from coming to the southeast.
Yep.
Meeting up with the warm weather from the Gulf. And it just creates a lot of dynamic activity, unfortunately, over the state. But I don't think we've seen anything. We have had some tornadoes since, but nothing like that.
Nothing like that. And that was very, very devastating. That was just, you guys were right there for it. Unfortunately, you weren't able to cover it live because you weren't even on the air yet. But you got, those are some of the very first B-roll DVC tapes that we have. They were on the smaller tapes. I remember this because the shelves that we had there, they are still there. I'm not there anymore, but the shelves are. Those tapes would be up at the top.
Long time,
yeah.
So.
The tapes are all the way up at the top there on those first few rows, and they say tornado on them from '98. And I always look at them over the years and see them. They're still up there on that top shelf because that's some of the first footage you guys captured. But you had to go and capture a lot of footage before you guys went on the air. Do you recall going out? You would send photographers out to cover stories, but then you'd also get them to cover and shoot a lot of B-roll for you on certain days, where it's like, go cover this story, but then go shoot B-roll at these other locations today. Was it some kind of situation like that for your photographers?
Yeah, so we had to, this is when you make an editorial decision. And again, all of these were, they were run by Bill, and Bill would approve them. There were some stories that, that were at least what, I consider they were big stories, and they were going to have a lot of legs. Mm-hmm. So it was one of those things that even though we were not on the air, it's like, listen, hey, Bill, I probably think we might want to cover this for X, Y, Z reason. And yeah, and of course, and he, being the very savvy news director that he is, he would agree to it. So we would shoot those on top of everything else. And I don't know if you know this or not, or for posterity, the MSA, which is the Metropolitan, MSA Metropolitan Statistical Area, it's huge. We're talking, if you include Flagler and Marion counties, we're talking over 9,200 square miles.
Jeez.
If you take those two out, it's about 7,000 square miles, which is still huge. So imagine having to get B-roll from, St. Cloud or Ponciana all the way up to, Daytona, to the north, and then Brevard to the east, and then, Ocala to the west. And we're not even talking WOGX yet.
Right.
Fox 51. This is what we were still trying to get going in Orlando.
And this was the challenge for your photographers and reporters and anybody who heard about this job. They were like, oh, I could get a job in Orlando. That would be great. But then you realize you're not getting a job in Orlando or even in Lake Mary. It's Central Florida, and that is way more square footage than you realize, I bet, when you get the job.
Oh, absolutely. And, a lot of times they cover things in Polk County now. So you're talking, it is a huge, think of the whole I-4 corridor from once you hit Polk County all the way to Daytona Beach, north to, Flagler County, south to Brevard, and if the story's big enough, Indian River County, all the way across. You go northwest then to Marion, and then if something happens big enough in Alachua County, you still cover that.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Huge area, a lot of area to cover for the size of your staff. It was a pretty small staff compared to all the other stations in town, I'm sure.
Oh, very small. If you look, there's a picture, I believe, of the initial staff. They're all just kind of hanging around the set.
Yes. There was a picture. Joanne's at the anchor desk, and all of them are around them. David Martin's there. Beth Sherman's there. I think even Steve Oldfield might be in the picture. But yeah, I'll put that picture up. And that was it. That was your staff, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was slim pickings. I don't know when Daryl Hill came in. I think he came in fairly early, but I don't know that he was there. I can't remember. You'd have to talk to him.
Yeah, you've got some pictures of him here that you
By the
sent
time we launched, I was just knee deep and just, trying to just, make sure that we got to everything. And the other thing was, remember, well, maybe you don't remember, but one of the things that Bill had talked about and that we had done in the promos is this is not going to be your parents' newscast.
Right.
So we had to find these stories that were, yes, the big stuff we covered, but okay, what else do you cover? How do you tell a story that nobody else is telling? So those were the challenges that we had every day. And I remember the editorial meetings, and, Bill would say, hey, what do you want to cover? And, people would sell their stuff. By selling, proposing a story to cover.
Right.
So, yeah, it was just, every day there was no 2 days that were the same. Never, ever, ever.
Bill said in his interview, he reminded all of you guys that, and he would point at himself and say, I am not your demo. So then you had to go for the younger audience. So you're not out there to please him with the story. You're out to please the numbers? 18 to 25? I forget the numbers.
Oh, I think it was 18 to 45.
45, okay, 18 to 45.
Yeah, because we had you may not remember, people that are seeing this may not remember, but that was back when, this is long before must-see TV, but this is when Fox had football, they had Married with Children, they had The Simpsons, they had all that stuff, and then the X-Files. So we had, there's a term in TV called a lead-in, which is the program that is there before your program.
Yep.
So we had a great lead-in with the X-Files. So we always had a really good lead-in, and you do teases, which is basically telling the audience, hey, this is what we're covering tonight. So we always had to have very, good teases and try to just hold that audience over through the 10 o'clock newscast.
It's got to be a challenge also. Some of those teases, let's say, for example, they're playing during the X-Files at 9 p.m. You throw a couple of teases in there, and if any of the other assignment editors at other stations see those and they realize, oh, shoot, we don't have that story, suddenly they're jumping to go get that story for their 11 o'clock show.
Yeah, that will definitely happen. For the most part, you try to do them vague enough, but just with enough of a hook that people will see that. Obviously, I remember very vividly our launch newscast. We had somebody nobody else had.
This was from March 1st, 1998. It was a big night. I went back to do the research.
Yeah.
It was a big night. X-Files had a big episode on that night. That was your lead-in, and this was March 1st, 1998. You recall what some of your big stories were that night?
I remember the lead-in story. The lead-in story nobody else had. We've been working on it for weeks. So we had gotten a tip. Obviously I was very fortunate that I had made very good relationships with, different agencies, whatever around town, this, that, the other thing. So prior to starting at Fox, so we would get tips from just different sources, and trying to make sure that I keep it generic enough where, excuse me, where nobody gets in trouble. We got a tip that there was a teacher that had started a romantic relationship with a student that teacher was tutoring, who happened to be the son of a very prominent local person.
Wow. And you guys sat on this story for a couple of weeks, huh?
So it wasn't just working the story. We had the interviews with the sheriff's office. We had the mugshots. We had, state attorneys. But then, because it was such a potentially volatile story, we had legal come in. They were going through all the scripts. I remember Donald Jones. It was his story. And Donald, if it was, I believe I'm 99.9% sure that it was yours, because I remember you being at the legal meetings. And we went through a fine tooth comb, and it was so funny. The next day, everybody was covering that story.
Oh yeah, you scooped everybody. Did you have a legal department there locally at the Lake Mary office, or did you go is that like the national or from Meredith?
No, not at the time. When we were owned by Meredith, another one of Bill Avery's very visionary things, one of the things that we had talked about was, why don't we have the legal team from Meredith come down and do like a few hour seminar with our reporters as to what you cannot get away with, what is proper, improper. And that whole first team, I'll never forget this. We were in one of the big conference rooms, and they went through. I mean, this was ours, and probably I'm editorializing this now. Probably most of our folks didn't care for it. However, but it was a very helpful thing, because that way they knew, from not just a local perspective, from a national perspective, what some of the things that you as a reporter can say and cannot say. And you might want to ask David or whoever you have next, that if they remember that, and then B, if it was helpful for them. I certainly know that it was helpful for me, and I cannot thank Bill Avery enough for putting that together.
So you put the legal team to work immediately, because on episode 1 you had a scandalous story about a teacher, and then you guys kind of owned that story probably for a couple of days, didn't you?
We did. No, the legal team, the legal seminar had been done before that. Mm-hmm. That was, but once we got a hold of this story, it was... we got them involved, because we wanted to make sure that there was going to be no issues mm-hmm. with anybody saying, oh well, you identified a minor, which we did not, or you identified even though it was a prominent person or a public person, but that person was not seeking the limelight. So there was a lot of things that went into it that we wanted to make sure we did it by the legal book, and we did. And and the next day, or then a couple of days later, everybody was like, chasing our tail on that one. So very proud of that. Very proud of the sources. Very proud of everybody who contributed on that story. I mean, it was a bang for day one.
One of the challenges you had also was, you do all this work. You sat on that story there for a couple of weeks. But then it comes time to air that show at 10 p.m. All you've got is a 30-minute show a day. That is it. So what were the challenges of the stories that you got on, and how long they were allowed to be?
Freshness. There was a lot of freshness that we had to make sure that there were stories that would hold, because, sometimes you'd send somebody out in the morning.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and the story might change during the day. So that's probably the biggest challenge. I mean, we had folks that work, the day, and then we had folks that work in the afternoons. Wasn't many, because it wasn't many.
Right.
But we try, and again, you're asking me to, to recall things from
25 years.
1997, 1998.
Yeah.
But I do remember that we did have a day crew and a night crew. We also used a lot of what's
Stringers.
called in
Yeah.
the industry stringers.
Yeah.
A stringer is a non-television employed news person that basically shoots video, at least back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
Say if it was a car accident or some scene or something happened, and then we would purchase the video from this person, and then we would be able to have a video for the newscast.
And that could be very
So
expensive for you guys, but unfortunately for you, it was kind of necessary to use stringers in the beginning.
Yeah, and remember, we did not have helicopter. I mean, I know we talked a little bit about that helicopter demo that came in, but when, say, for example, when the fires happened, we ended up having to get very resourceful and get what is known as this fixed-wing aircraft, which is like a Cessna, and we would put David, we would put David on the plane, and hey, go get some aerial shots of this, this fire or anything that was big at the time. I mean. Yeah, you just have to get creative, very, very creative, and the great thing about the staff, from management all the way down to anybody that heck, even the janitors, everybody was all in on this. We were all in. We knew we needed to make it work, and I cannot. I mean, if there's anything that comes out of this conversation, is I cannot thank everybody and anybody who was part of that team that just made it work, because it was as other people have said before me, it was literally lightning in a bottle.
Another challenge you had was that compared to the other TV stations in town, your phone wasn't ringing a lot with, hey, I got this tip, hey, I got this story, oh, I want you guys to have this exclusive. That didn't happen a lot, I'm guessing. The phones didn't ring a whole lot there as much as they are compared to other TV stations. But Bill told a story about you acquiring footage during the tornadoes of something in Oviedo. It turned out to be surveillance footage of a store. Was it a Walmart or something?
I don't remember that one. Trying to remember that.
It was
one.
something about there was surveillance footage, or not surveillance, but the footage inside of a store during the storm that hit during the tornadoes, and he said that was something that you got that no one else had.
That's very possible. Art, I'm sorry.
It's been so long.
It's been so long, and remember that the tornadoes were shortly followed by the fires, because you had basically what it was, as I recall, it was a very, very wet winter in '97, and then we had a very active spring, meaning with the tornadoes, and then we went into a drought.
It got
and
dry.
That's when the fires started.
Got dry,
and
and that's when the fires. Yeah.
If I saw the video, I might be able to recall. But again, when you're dealing with 100 stories a day,
right?
I'd love to see it. And if I saw the video, I would say, "Oh yeah, I remember
you would
now."
Probably
but
jog your memory. Yeah, that's another one of the challenges.
I'm old.
I'd love to go back and find. I mean, all the DVC tapes are still there from the VOSOTs and the packages. And unfortunately, not a lot of air checks recorded back then, like entire newscasts. I'm still searching for the very first episode. I've been contacting people on Facebook that were looking for it. Old people who used to work in Master Control. I'm looking for the March 1st episode, which I saw one time. Someone in Master Control showed it to me because he said, "Oh, you should watch this." The show started and Joanne was at the desk, and then for like 2 seconds something happened and it cut away to a commercial, and then it went right back to Joanne at the desk, and then the show resumed as normal. But I know that tape is out there somewhere. Somebody's got it.
I will look. I have a couple of boxes that I just haven't had a chance to look through. And the thing with me is, I still have beta tapes.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't have a beta player.
Right, transferring.
One of the very interesting things about making decisions, and again, going back to just Bill making really, really good decisions, because there were servers. Remember, a server starts with frozen video. So you have to have what is known as a a starter screen, which is what 13 News did back in those days. I don't know if you remember that. They would have like a little screen or a graphic that would start talking about the story, then they roll the video and then switch to that. So we had a situation where we had to make a decision. Are we going to have redundant servers, or are we going to have parallel servers, meaning that you can do a transition from one server to the other and you have tape as backup? And again, all these decisions before we even launch. And then Bill made the decision to say, hey, let's do parallel servers, tape backup, let's go.
Is this referring to, was it called the AirPlay system? We'd have an A and a B, because after we would, like Mikey and I would finish editing for the night, we'd have to sit in the room to run the AirPlay, and then you hear the director say roll A or roll B. But we still had a whole row of our tapes lined up just in case it crashed, and it was prone to doing that sometimes.
Well, there's sometimes a little glitchy. It was brand new technology.
Sure.
It happened.
That happened. And speaking of Mikey, your original editor that was there, and Bridget, and before I came there, I came in after a full year after you guys had finished. Thinking back to the staff that you had, you kind of got to be there also as each person was hired. So you were there before Joanne was hired. Do you have any memories of first meeting Joanne Bauer, your first lead anchor, or seeing her audition tape or anything like that?
Yes, of course. Very personable. She was super, super nice. One of the things that we did is, so Bill would meet with them, and then afterwards we would go out. We would go out for, what was the name of that one place? Anyways, it was like a little pub over there, and we would go get a bite to eat, and and have an adult beverage, and you would always get, sometimes you don't get the same reaction from a job interview that you do when you're talking to somebody in a more relaxed setting. So Joanne killed her interview, and she killed it, after the interview. So she was definitely, she was definitely somebody that just a sweetheart. And I saw her several years later when, I think she went out to Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
I ran into her out there. I think she's doing real estate now.
Yes.
And she's doing very, very well. So, And the other thing that I would tell you when people had interviews with Bill, I don't know if you recorded what I was telling you earlier, is Bill would give people a T-shirt.
Oh, yes. You had a visual for us.
So you would get the T-shirt when you got a job, and anyways, this is just So he had these T-shirts, and he would give them to people, and that's how Tara and I knew somebody got the job, because they came out of Bill's office with a T-shirt.
That was their signing bonus. They got the official Fox 35 T-shirt,
I guess. And then the other one was for the first team. This is the other one I was going to show you. Of course, I still have everything. This was a different shirt that we were given as the first team, and I still have it. And First Team 98.
First Team 98.
Yeah, and I don't know if my other teammates have it, but yeah. So it was a great experience and a wonderful opportunity.
I'll have to ask them that. The plan is for us to get one of these group meetings like this where we're all together at the same time, all talking. We'll have to see if anybody else can pull out. I've seen some of the Mustang keychains. Beth said she still has hers, and I know I've seen the hats or the Fox 35 tissue boxes that were out that had Janice's picture on it and Scott Burridge and Joanne Bauer on the tissue box, and there were a couple other items like that, and of course, and then eventually there was the billboard that you could see. There's photos that you sent me of people looking up at the billboard for Fox 35, and it had the three of them on there as well. When do you recall you finally got yourself, if you did at all, ever get into a routine? You were the only one working the desk. I imagine you probably had to start to hire a second person to work the desk eventually.
Yes, we did. Man, give me 1 second. I don't remember her name.
I'm trying to think of short red hair.
Yeah.
I saw her picture the other day, and I had to think about it for a second, and then it came to me, and it'll come to me again, and maybe she's out there watching.
Yes, I know she's in Texas. She's a teacher now. She has a beautiful son. Gosh, the name will come to me.
Yeah, me too.
Ooh.
That's so bad. But then
Yeah.
again, 25 years ago, what can you expect?
Right.
Short red hair, and there's pictures of her that you sent me as well. So she was your second hire at the desk then,
Yep.
and the two of you
Yeah, she
split
was
the
great.
shifts.
By the way, she was great.
Yeah, and if I also, you'll have to remind me. Yeah, I guess the two of you had to split 7 days of the week because we were doing shows on the weekends as well.
Yeah, and and some of the producers really helped out. When some of the off hours when I was getting some sleep, or oh God, man. See, now I'm.
You can't stop thinking about her name. I mean, we worked together all those years, and I could be sitting in an edit bay and I could hear her yelling out for somebody or slamming a phone down. And she was a firecracker, they would say. Danielle, is it Danielle?
Danielle,
Yes.
yeah, Danielle Vogel.
Got
That's
it.
right, Danielle Vogel. Yeah,
Got it.
yeah. No, she's great. She's great. I mean, to this day, she's a great person.
Yeah. Good. Maybe we'll reach out to her as well. You said she's a school teacher in Texas?
Yes. Well, she was a teacher. I think she's now into higher type education.
Okay.
She's she's got her master. She's like the. I mean, she was super smart back then. She's even smart. She's like very accomplished now as a professional.
And that's another thing while I think of it, Danielle and all the others that were there, and it's a point I made with Bill, there was nobody over the age of 30 that worked there other than Bill, I believe.
Well, in the newsroom, I was a grandpa because I was 30. I was 30 when I was hired. I turned 31 in 98. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just remember taking a look around, and I see Mikey and I see David Martin and I see even the directors, and it's like, oh, we're all just kids. This is like going to college for us. It was such a great time. We were all so young, and we had to do a 1.5 hour show every day.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and then you added the whole WOGX thing, which by the way, I found this one. I don't know if you can see it.
Now, tell us, was that something that was given to everybody as well?
I don't know how I ended up with it, but I have it. And then obviously there was this one for the morning show.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll remember this one.
Yes. The morning show started in 2000, I believe. So you were still there in 2000. I don't recall, because it started happening, I don't recall what year it was that you had left. Were you there during September 11th?
I was not.
You were not there. You were at the airport.
I left in, let's see. I had told Bill that I would stay 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was hired in October of 97,
Mm-hmm.
which means I left in October of 2000.
So you had a 3-year plan, you told Bill.
Well, Bill had asked me to stay for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
We did not. I didn't have a contract, but I shook his hand and I told him, "Say, yeah, of course, I'll stay 3 years. That's fine. You have my word." And I did. And by the time I left, Bill was no longer there.
Right.
But because I had made, my handshake is my word,
Mm-hmm.
so I stayed 3 years.
Yeah.
And then I moved on to the airport, which is where I'm at now. And I thought I was going to have a not so eventful job in public affairs. And, well, that didn't quite turn out that way. So,
But you are still at the airport, so you've just changed a position there.
I am. I've been very, very fortunate that I have. I don't no longer do public affairs, but I've been very, very fortunate that they have given me many opportunities, and and I'm just very happy over there.
So you've been at OIA for over 20 years now, I'm guessing, doing the math.
Yeah, October this year will be 23 years.
23 years, yes. So were there times that, of course, September 11th would be a perfect example of that. Were there at times when your news desk brain starts to turn when a story like that happens, when you're no longer in news?
Oh, it was turning.
Yeah. I mean, where you were,
was
I mean,
turning that day.
it was chaotic, I'm sure, at OIA and all airports around the country when everything got shut down. But yeah, I imagine.
Well, it was It was like anything else that for those of us who lived through it, there was a lot of, or I shouldn't say a lot. There was some not knowing what was going on in the beginning because, there was the first incident, and then there was the second incident, and then there was the third incident, and then the Secretary of Transportation issued a basically everybody has to land. All aircraft have to land, and they were, basically I don't want to say closing borders, but they were trying to get all aircraft on the ground so they could figure out what was going on.
Were you already at work that day?
Oh yeah, I was there at work that day. My wife at the time, she was in the news business. She was over at Channel 6. I'll never forget this. She called me. She's like, "Are you watching TV?" And I'm like, "No, I'm working." Because right when it first happened, so I didn't know what was going on. And then, of course, we turned it on. This is when the very first,
When it appeared to be an accident.
well, it seemed like an accident at the time.
Right.
Nobody really knew what was going on. Again, in those first couple hours, it was very, very, very different. And obviously, a tragedy beyond what anybody could ever imagine. But yeah, then we ended up, they ended up landing all the aircraft, no matter where they were. Anybody that was airborne over the United States had to land. One interesting factoid: there is probably not enough ramp space. Ramp is, there's the runways, and then there's the taxiways and the ramps, which is the concrete areas where aircraft move. If you were to land every single aircraft that's flying over the United States at any given moment, it's going to be really tight because there's not enough room.
And I imagine that was the situation at OIA. You guys were tight, not a lot of runway space left, a lot of planes just sitting on the tarmac.
They were bringing them in pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that happened was, there was I think it was a day or a day and a half or 2 days before they could start doing flights again. And remember, because you may not remember, and the people who are watching this may not remember, but because they're called diversion. A diversion is, say, I have a plane's going from Miami to New York, and they're told land now. They have to divert to another airport. I'm not saying that's who diverted to ours, but yeah. So we had a lot of diversions, and these people are not, the passengers are not landing where they're supposed to. So what do? Do they go to hotels? Do they go? Obviously, the hotels got filled up in a hurry.
Yeah.
The community was very, very responsive. They opened up, they let people stay at their homes, and that happened all across the United States until they could finally get things going back up again. And then, of course, before you start an aircraft, you have to do maintenance on it. So they would, at the hangars or whatever, they would put fuel in them, they crank them up. Everybody thought everybody was going airborne again. It's like, no, they're doing maintenance, or the phones are ringing off the hook, and it's like, it's not up to us, it's up to the Secretary of Transportation and the administration. So yeah, it was crazy.
So that was an example of a story that you were no longer at a station, so you weren't able to be there in the newsroom for an event like that, just like you were not working at a station that was up and running yet when it was time for those fires and those tornadoes. But do you have any examples of a story when you were at Fox 35 that really stands out in your mind, a phone call that you got that ended up being an exclusive for Fox 35 that really stands out, that you kind of helped piece together?
Oh, sure. That very first one.
Oh, yeah, the teacher one. Yeah, that was huge.
That very first one was, it was, while the situation for the people involved was horrible, it was something nobody else had, and it was an exclusive. And when you're in the news business, people, I would like to convey this message for people who are not in the news business that may be seeing this. When you're in the news business, you basically tend to grow a pretty thick skin when it comes to certain things, and you look at it from a very objective perspective, but that is not to minimize the impact that those actions or whatever the story is has had on other people. And now that I'm not in the business, obviously I reflect on some of these things, and it's like, oh my God, those things were, they were horrible for the people that were involved in it. But at the time when you were chasing And if whether if it's coleslaw wrestling, I heard that one.
Yes, Beth said that.
That was a good one, by the way. That was a very lighthearted story.
That was a Fox
but
35 exclusive, I'm sure.
very visual story. Or some of the harder type news. It's one of those things that you just, as a news person, you're trying to tell a story of your community, of your society. And every day you have to make those decisions. Okay, how does this reflect on us as a society? How does this reflect on us as a community? And that's what the editorial decisions that have to be made.
And I don't know if those same decisions are being made today, or they're just throwing everything on the air that comes over their phones when the phone rings.
Well, to the point you made earlier, what is known in the industry as the news hole, which is how much news you have to fill in a given day. I mean, I think some of these stations now, they're like 8 hours a day.
Sure.
I mean, we had 30 minutes in the get-go. So we could be very, choosy about the things that we chose to put on the air. And then we left the noise, out. But the things that were newsworthy, at least in our editorial decisions, that Bill made and, the producers made, we were able to pick and choose, and we were very fortunate on that. Obviously, as the news hole expanded, you had to fill it with more and more and more stuff.
And it did. It jumped. Once that morning show started in 2000, suddenly there's 2 more hours that you had to fill. How involved were you with the beginnings of the Good Day Orlando?
So you had to, as a person on the desk, everybody's workload went up, because not only did they have to do the story, not only did they have to cut their teases, as we talked about, that's a terminology that says, you're telling people what you're going to show later. They had to cut their story for the 10 p.m. newscast, and then they had to re-edit, whether if it was a voice over video, which is what is known as a VO, or a voice, or a VOSOT, which is a voice over sound on tape. Again, just explain the terminology of the news. Or if you had to completely do a repackage, and whether or not you had to do a stand-up intro, stand-up outro. So these are things that we had to ask our, reporters. And again, it wasn't a huge staff. I mean, it had grown, but you still had to ask a lot more of everybody. And not only that, but say if you had, some sort of something happened overnight, you have to call a crew in and have them go cover. You have to go do a live shot. So there was all these things that he created. Obviously, the workload multiplied, not just by, 100% or 200% because it was an hour, but it multiplied so much more because you had to not only did you have to redo what you had done for the night before into a format that looked fresh the next morning, but if you had anything that happened overnight, you had to go out there and cover it.
Yeah, and one of your challenges also is once that morning show started, you had to start putting more people on the desk with you. I mean, you weren't going to start working 24 hours a day. Do you remember when the switch happened? Okay, we're going to add a morning show. Did you have to add a third person to the desk once you started to add the morning show?
Well, there was a lot of things that were changing because remember the morning show started early in 2000, and I left, I want to say in September. So, I mean, I hate to say this, but I was pretty much checked out after the spring, just because there was a lot of things that were happening, at that time.
Sure.
And I knew that, my days there were, coming to an end. So, if you tell me names, I'll remember.
But you weren't working overnight shifts at all once the morning show started, were you?
No, the only times that I would come in overnight would be something like, say, Y2K.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I know Beth mentioned it a little bit in her discussion with you, but people don't remember that was the biggest non-story story that ever happened.
Correct. It certainly was. Yeah, and it was covered. We had to cover that story, even though it wasn't a story.
Oh my God! And I'll never forget. We were all there at the station that night, December 31st. Nobody got to have New Year's,
right?
Because, there was this thought that the stoplights were going to stop working, that
Computers.
that the computers were going to stop working. We had all these plans. A lot of people made a lot of money doing software patches. That's why there was like the .com boom and bust, which happened in 99, 2000, as you recall, because everybody was freaking out. And then I'll never forget, we were in the newsroom. We're watching Australia, which was the first country that crossed over. And we're looking at each other going, okay. So we wait, okay, fine. They're their own little separate country. Why not? Let's see what happens when it hits the next continent.
Yep.
And I'll never forget turning around and just saying, this is a non-story.
But it was the biggest story of all time for those weeks leading up to it.
It was a huge story for months and months, and before that, and a lot of people, not talking about news people, a lot of companies made a lot of money.
Oh yeah, computer patches
based upon software patches and all of these other things that obviously cell phones weren't what they are now, but software patches and et cetera, et cetera.
So reflecting back on your time there, you had 3 solid years, which you worked there for 3 years, but it was 6 years worth of work, I'm sure, because of all the hours you put in. Reflecting back on that time, what are your thoughts about launching the station and the people that you got to work with in those first few months leading up to it? What kind of thoughts do you have about those people?
I will put it in one sentence. Well, maybe 2. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. And I've made friends for a lifetime.
You all did go through something together that to this day, I don't know if anyone else can relate to it, because every TV station is up and running. You guys went through something that no one else can tell stories about, really.
Oh, I could tell you some stories, but probably not. Not on camera. Okay, Beth, I love her. I love her to death.
Yes.
Not a bad story, but I remember when she came on. For those of you who don't know, she was a Price is Right contestant.
Yes,
And
I
she
can't believe I
won
forgot
a
to mention
vehicle,
that.
Jeep.
Yes, I've seen the footage
And
of her.
she was driving that Jeep when she started working at the station.
Oh, see, I wish I'd seen a photo of that. I can't believe I talked to her for an hour and I completely forgot to mention the Price is Right thing. I've seen the whole episode before. She's shown it before, and she's been on the news talking about it. But I can't believe I forgot to talk to her about that. But so she drove into the station with the Jeep that she won.
Yeah, she won the Price is Right Jeep.
She won the whole showcase, yeah, and that is great. I never knew she drove in with that Jeep. Now I got to see if she can send me a photo of that. I love that story. But yeah, you worked with some amazing characters those first few weeks and months leading up to the first episode.
And we became very close-knit just because we worked so many hours together to put something together that a lot of us, it was the first time we ever did it. I think Steve Oldfield mentioned a little bit about some of the little get-togethers that we had.
Yeah. He mentioned Universal Studios or Islands of Adventure when it opened up.
Yeah, and as crews, sometimes because we had, particularly before launching, we had a little bit of time to get together as friends, after work hours or whatever, and just share a lot of time and a lot of good things. And there's there's some stories about that, but it was really good. I mean, it was a lot of camaraderie. It was a lot of again, I think Bill said it best. It was lightning in a bottle, and I don't know that. At least I know I won't see that in my lifetime again, but I will cherish it for a very long time. And again, I cannot thank any and all folks that were there that made that happen, because it was unbelievable.
And I think for those reasons, it's the why I wanted to try and reconnect with everybody for the 25th anniversary, because it's been far too long. I mean, we saw each other all 10 years ago for the 15th anniversary that you helped kind of organize, but it was lightning in a bottle, and it was such a great time in my life as well. And I really wanted to look back and reflect on that. And because of COVID, we've all gotten this kind of web technology where anybody should be able to talk with anybody. And so for those reasons, I thought it'd be great to just revisit with all of you guys from that time, because it was just a great time in my life. And there are days when I miss it.
cannot thank you enough for working on this project.
Sure.
Funny thing, I still live in the same house I did when I worked back then, but that's why I have all the stuff. So
good. Nothing got thrown out from one move to another, because you're still in the same place.
I'm still in the same house. No, but listen, I cannot thank you enough for for putting this together, and and I love to hear other folks' stories, other folks' perspectives,
Yeah,
because
I've got
oh,
other.
I'm sure somebody will have bad stories about me because
Oh,
yeah.
I wish people would let loose. I was hoping Beth Sherman would let loose. And it's been a very conservative, very straightforward interview session I've been having with everyone. But I got to tell you, there were times back in the edit bays at Beth Sherman, whoo, man. She, like I said, she was very passionate about her work, but boy, she would get so fired up sometimes. And I look back on those times as just they were so great because I was working with people who would get mad and frustrated. It's because they really cared about what they were doing, and all we had was that 30 minutes a day. So they really wanted it to be as perfect as possible, and she was one of those people for sure.
Okay, I'll leave you with one that so we were at a party
Here we go.
at somebody's house. This is not a Beth Sherman story, but I was dared to wear somebody else's bathing suit and get in the pool. I did. Um, but it was not a bathing suit that was very comfortable for me.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'm sure God, I hope nobody has pictures of that.
But those are the types of friends you had. You'd go out and do stuff after work and you'd hang out. I don't know if people do that as much these days with coworkers. You finish your job, you go home at the end of the day. At the end of the day at Fox 35, sometimes that was just the beginning of the day because we'd do our shows, or we'd have these really long lunch breaks where we get a chance to really hang out with people. I don't know if you could. You were trapped at the desk, but the rest of us, we were able to go out and take some long lunch breaks and really get to know each
Oh
other.
no, I had a great time, and I call that team building.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you reflecting back with me on those days. It is my hope in the near future, before we get to the March 1st date, that we all get together for a group chat and we get as many people as possible on a multi-box WebEx where we can all talk about the good old days. And maybe between now and then, we'll find that March 1st, 1998 episode. Somebody's got it in their archive somewhere.
And I certainly hope that I have a better computer by then that quits crashing.
That's all right. Yeah. So if you are watching this episode, it may have been a little glitchy. The audio was great. So you may enjoy listening to the podcast audio version as well, which you can find on iTunes. Thank you for bringing that up. You want to do that rather than the video, but I tell you, the video version of this should be pretty good because you sent me 100 photos, and I'm going to show every one of those photos you sent me. So thank you for getting those to me.
You're very welcome. It's your project.
Yes.
I mean, use them as you see fit.
Thank you. I will. And we hope to be visiting with you again soon in a group chat.
Yeah, certainly. And we should all get together again. We're all not that far from each other. So I mean, well, some are, but I'm sure everybody would come back down for another get together.
I agree. Thank you very much.